Hello, church family. I'm here with Pastor Ryan and Pastor Tim, and we are wanting to talk about the Ask a Pastor questions that come from our sermon on Sunday. So, Pastor Ryan, we're in Hebrews 11, and you presented a message about a faith that perseveres
Right.
using Moses as our example. And could you just recap that message in about 30 seconds?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So we got to the point in the chapter that deals with Moses, and specifically, the author of Hebrews was pointing out the different points of crisis that Moses had gone through and how he had a faith that persevered. And it wasn't a paralyzed faith, it wasn't inactive. There was a lot of activity in the way that he was pursuing God, what he was seeing about God in those times of crisis, and ultimately how it strengthened and gave him a faith that persevered through those times. And I really believe that this passage is something that is applicable to us today as we walk through a crisis as well, and to do so looking at the Lord through the eyes of faith to give us that same type of perseverance.
Amen.
Oh, absolutely. And Tim, Pastor Ryan shared with us in a PDF that can be found on our website some discussion questions, which are so helpful. I know that small groups are using those during the week. You're using them with students, and these are certainly available for families to use and for individuals to use and study. And so one of the questions that Pastor Ryan posed in that PDF was, let me read it for you. What aspect of God's character will help you in this current situation? So can you give us your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, I think for me, in the midst of whatever I'm going through, one of the things that really keeps me grounded and gives me great perspective is recognizing God's sovereignty, recognizing that He's in control. He knows what's happening. There was an old friend of mine who used to ask me the question, Tim, did it ever occur to you that nothing ever occurs to God, right? He knows it's coming. He's got it in His plan. And so for better or for worse, He knows, and He also knows where I am in the midst of that. And He will equip me to see me through that, right? And ultimately, what really gives me comfort is knowing that He's in control of even that work within me, right? Philippians 1:6, that He who began a good work in me will see it through to completion. And so knowing that just really helps me stay grounded in the midst of whatever I'm facing.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, Pastor Ryan, there was a question that was sent in, and it was a little bit tricky because it goes into some deeper issues. Basically, the spirit of the question was, Moses speaks in verse 26 of chapter 11. The author of Hebrews speaks of Moses concerning Christ and the reproach of Christ. And so what the question asked was, how would Moses have this idea of Christ when he was living, so much earlier than Jesus was born? So could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's a great question, and even as we read through those verses, it might be surprising to some of the readers to see this concept of the reproach of Christ when He lived before the earthly life of Christ. And so commentators have given a lot of speculation on this. As a deliverer himself, delivering the people out of bondage, was he somewhat of a prototype of what the role and work of Christ as the deliverer was? Did he have maybe a second idea? Did he have a greater understanding of the messianic role of the deliverer that would someday come? And so now the author is connecting that to the name of Christ. But really, here's my take on it. I think that what Moses was doing is he was reminding these Hebrew Christians that just as Moses had identified with the people of God, he made that as a clear decision, and that brought him reproach. They, by identifying with Christ, are also going to be facing hardship. That's what the theme of Hebrews is all about. And so he was making a connection that those living under the old covenant, who were the people of God, and those who were living under the new covenant as the people of God in Christ were together in the sense that they would all at some point receive that reproach, that hardship. So I think it's really more of an identification with Christ as an identification with the people of God. And even looking back at the previous chapter, in chapter 10, looking at verse 33, there is even a statement there that assures them that they have already been receiving this type of hardship. And so I really, again, believe that the reference to Christ is helping them make that connection to their identity as belonging to the people of God.
Right.
And isn't that so appropriate for us? You know, as we are
Absolutely.
going through this time, we're not necessarily facing reproach per se, some could be, but just that understanding of our identification with Christ and that it is through faith, and we have a God who is faithful to us even in this time. And so,
That's right.
thank you for continuing to bring us that message from Hebrews 11. I appreciate just the time to be thinking about those who've gone before us in the faith and how we can continue on in the faith as well. So thank you both.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And I hope you have a good week. And we will come back next week on Thursday. So,
Okay. Very
Awesome.
good.
Thanks very much, Stephanie.
Thank you, Tim.